You think the worst way to die is from a disease or a car accident. But the humans who came before you died in ways that simply no longer exist. And one of them involved two completely different predators attacking the same person at the same time. About 3 million years ago, the human genus began its journey on this planet. Not just us, Homo sapiens, but at least 14 different human species that appeared, lived, and disappeared. And throughout all those millions of years, pain, suffering, and death were constant companions. But the deaths I'm going to show you today are not only tragic, some of them are so unique that they literally could not happen again. So let's count down the 10 worst deaths ever discovered in prehistoric humans.
Number 10. The oldest murder victim in history. Let's start with something that changes everything you thought you knew about human violence. This skull was found in a cave in Spain, and at first glance, it might even look like the skull of any person. But it does not belong to a Homo sapiens. It belongs to a Homo heidelbergensis, a species of archaic humans that lived more than 400,000 years ago. And this individual had 2 large holes in the head. The researchers who found him immediately knew that those holes were what killed him. The damage was catastrophic, the kind that destroys the skull and the brain almost instantly. The question was, what caused this? The first idea was a fall. Caves are sloped and full of sharp rocks. Makes sense, right? But no. If it had been a fall, the holes would be different from each other, and these two were almost identical. On top of that, no animal that existed in Spain at that time would leave marks like that. So the scientists started comparing this damage with injuries caused by stone tools, stone axes specifically, and then it fit perfectly.
This individual was murdered, deliberately, 430,000 years ago. That makes him the oldest homicide victim ever recorded in human history. Proof that violence existed long before us. And he was not alone. Thousands of other bones were found in the same cave, many with similar signs. It is believed that this place may have been one of the oldest examples of a site intended for the burial of the dead. Number 9. Attacked by 2 predators at the same time. Now let's talk about OH7, and I'll warn you already, his story is completely unfair. OH7 was a Homo habilis, one of the oldest human species that ever existed. He lived in eastern Africa and was small, about 1.2 meters tall. In today's world, he would be considered very short. Back then, that made him extremely vulnerable. But size was not OH7's biggest problem. The worst part was the day he went to get water. In a swampy region full of predators, he approached a river, and a giant crocodile ambushed him. Not the crocodile you see today in a documentary. We're talking about Crocodylus thorbjarnarsoni, an extinct species that reached 7.6 meters in length and more than 2 tons. For a person who was 1.2 meters tall, this was not a battle. It was an execution. The bones show enormous puncture marks on the left leg. Entire parts of the leg were missing, torn away during the attack. OH7 tried to turn around to escape, and that's when he made the fatal mistake. As he turned his body away from the crocodile, he left his back completely exposed. And there was a feline nearby, similar to a leopard, which took advantage of that exact opening. The marks on the back of the skull are compatible with an attack from an animal of the Panthera genus. Long grooves on the parietal bone, the kind a leopard or a closely related species would leave. 2 predators at the same time. And none of the marks showed signs of healing. OH7 died right there. This could not happen today because the giant crocodile no longer exists. And even so, to this day, crocodiles and felines are still seen fighting over prey in the wild. The difference is that today's are smaller, luckily for us. Number 8. Vitamin A. The slowest death is not always the most obvious one, and this next case is a perfect example of that. KNMER 1808 was a Homo erectus who lived in Kenya about 1.7 million years ago. When scientists found her bones in 1974, they immediately realized that something was wrong. The skeleton showed abnormal bone growth, excessive bone remodeling, and evidence of massive and prolonged bleeding, but without any visible injury. The explanation was clear to the researchers: hypervitaminosis A, vitamin A poisoning. This makes her the oldest known example of hypervitaminosis A in any human. She suffered from it chronically, and she probably felt every second of it. With weakness, headaches, loss of hair and teeth, skin peeling, and severe joint pain for a long period before dying.
But where did so much vitamin A come from? The liver of carnivorous animals. This organ is an extremely concentrated source of vitamin A. The liver of a polar bear, for example, contains the equivalent of more than 150 years of the recommended dose for a human being. She probably ate the liver of large carnivores frequently without having the slightest idea of what it was doing to her body.
Number 7. The Tong Child and the Giant Bird. Most people, when they think about danger, look to the sides, or downward when they are in the water. But almost nobody looks up. And back then, that was a fatal mistake. The Tong Child was an Australopithecine, so technically he was not part of the Homo genus. But his death is so unique that it deserves to be here. He had terrible injuries on the face and head, punctures in the eye sockets, deep scratches on the top of the skull. This damage is almost identical to what is found in modern monkeys that were killed by eagles. The conclusion was that a large bird drove its beak and claws into the child's eyes and head, probably killing him instantly before carrying him away to be devoured.
But the story does not end there. What was found was only a skull, no other bones, and it was in a remote region of the Kalahari Desert, inside a cave where there was nothing else. No human bones, no animal bones. The hypothesis is that the bird carried the body away, ate it, and the skull rolled into a nearby cave, where it remained for millions of years until it was rediscovered. You will never look at a large bird the same way again.
Number 6. The end of an entire species. Now let's talk about something even more tragic: the possible real-time extinction of an entire species. Homo erectus was one of the most successful human species of all time. They were the first to leave Africa, the first to colonize Europe and Asia. And in Java, Indonesia, they made their last stand. The most recent Homo erectus fossils we know of came from Java and are about 110,000 years old. And what is fascinating is that all of these individuals seem to have died at the same time. Almost a century ago, a research team on the island found a true cemetery. More than a dozen individuals, all adults, all mixed and intertwined in the same place, without evidence of disease, severe injuries, or advanced old age. They all died together.
The type of sediment where the fossils were found suggests that a flood carried the bodies to a narrow point in a river where they became trapped. But the most recent hypothesis points to a volcanic lahar, flows of mud, rock, and high-temperature water that descend the slopes of volcanoes after eruptions. We know that these modern events can travel more than 100 kilometers and kill tens of thousands of people. If that is what killed the last Homo erectus of Java, then these fossils are one of the rarest pieces of evidence of an extinction happening in real time. The final chapter of an entire species, frozen in the mud.
Number 5. The Giant Hyenas and Peking Man. If you think hyenas are already terrifying, wait until you discover what they were like back then. Pachycrocuta brevirostris was an extinct giant hyena. Adults could exceed 150 kilograms, rivaling lionesses in size. But unlike a lion, Pachycrocuta had a disproportionately enormous head, with deep muscle attachment marks on the skull that indicate an absurd bite force. The kind of jaw that crushes a hundreds of thousands of years old Homo erectus skull as if it were nothing. And that brings us to Peking Man. At the Zhoukoudian archaeological site in China, the remains of more than 28 individuals were found inside a cave. And about 67% of them showed bite marks attributed to Pachycrocuta. Not just marks, bones were literally shattered and crushed. The hyenas wanted the marrow inside the bones, the most nutritious part. And judging by the condition of the skeletons, they were very successful.
For a long time, it was believed that this cave had been inhabited by humans who practiced cannibalism inside it. After all, there were stone tools at the site. But more detailed analyses, including of bones from other animals found together there, showed that the cave was actually a Pachycrocuta den. Humans visited the place during certain periods, which explains the tools, but the hyenas were in control. This site is a reminder that Homo erectus, even as a skilled hunter, was not at the top of the food chain everywhere. In Zhoukoudian, that place belonged to the hyenas.
Number 4.
O menino
The
de Turkana
Turkana
e a
and the
infecção
dental
dental.
infection. Sometimes the cruelest death does not come from a predator or a natural disaster. Sometimes it comes from a misaligned tooth. The Turkana boy, whose scientific name is KNMWT15000, was another Homo erectus. He lived in Kenya between 1.5 and 1.6 million years ago. He died between 8 and 9 years of age. After his baby teeth fell out, the permanent molars and premolars grew irregularly. They collided with each other, creating constant pressure that turned into an infection. And the infection never healed. It became a chronic abscess. Today, a dental abscess is serious but treatable. 1.5 million years ago, it was a death sentence. What probably happened is that the infection spread into the bloodstream, causing septicemia, what we call sepsis, a generalized infection that destroys the body from the inside.
Based on the position of the bones when he was found, it is believed that he fell face down in a swampy area, too weak to get up, and died there with his face submerged in shallow water. After death, a herd of animals walked over the body, pushing it into the muddy ground, which helped with fossilization. Later, ash from a volcanic eruption covered part of the skeleton, creating a kind of natural tomb. But the Turkana boy's misfortunes do not end there. More recent analyses discovered that he also suffered from a severe herniated disc, so serious that it was probably disabling. The kind of thing that today is treated with physical therapy and, in severe cases, surgery. Back then, it completely limited his movements and made him unable to escape from any predator. If the dental infection did not kill him, the herniated disc would finish the job. Number 3. The 430,000-year-old warrior with multiple traumas. We return to the Atapuerca cave in Spain, the same one where we found the oldest murder victim. But this time with another individual and another story. Among the bones found at the site, there was a young skull with signs of repeated trauma. Multiple fractures, different moments, different directions. What does that tell us? That this individual did not die from a single violent event. He survived several and kept living. This type of evidence is fascinating because it shows something unexpected. These archaic humans probably took care of one another. Someone with so many repeated traumas would have needed help to survive each one of them, which implies some form of social care.
And even so, in the end, violence was what ended his story. Researchers believe he died from a final blow to the head after a lifetime of conflict. It is hard not to think about how familiar that is.
Number 2. The Neanderthal with arthritis. Neanderthals are usually portrayed as brutes, but what the fossils actually show is something very different. Shanidar I, as he is known, was a Neanderthal who lived in Iraq about 40 to 50,000 years ago, and his skeleton tells an impressive story. He was blind in one eye. He had his right arm amputated or rendered useless since very young. He suffered from severe arthritis. He had old, healed fractures in multiple parts of the body, and he was deaf in at least one ear. In practical terms, in prehistory, this individual could not have survived alone. Each one of these conditions by itself made life extremely difficult. Together, they made independent survival almost impossible. What does that mean? That the group took care of him for years, maybe for decades. A human being who could not hunt, who could not fight, who depended on others to eat and protect himself. And even so, he lived until middle age by the standards of the time. His death, in the end, was probably caused by a rock fall in the cave where he lived. Fast, at least. But what remains is the image of a community that chose to care for someone vulnerable, long before any modern notion of healthcare or organized compassion. And we have reached number 1, the death that, out of all the ones I researched, was the longest, the most painful, and the loneliest. We return to KNM/ER1808, our Homo erectus friend with hypervitaminosis A. But now I'm going to tell you what researchers concluded about what she went through before dying. Her condition was chronic. That means she did not die quickly. She was sick for a long period of time. The deformities in the bones, especially in the limbs, indicate a level of constant pain that most people today will never experience. Every movement of the arms and legs would have been agonizing. The joints growing abnormally, the bone remodeling itself the wrong way in response to the toxicity. And beyond the pain, extreme weakness, skin peeling, loss of hair and teeth, constant headaches. She woke up like that every single day.
But what makes this case number 1 is not just the pain. It is what the fossil indirectly suggests. Because a person in that condition, at that time, could not have survived alone for very long. Which implies, just like in the case of Shanidar I, that someone took care of her, someone carried her, someone brought food to her. And even so, without any knowledge that it was the liver causing all of that, she continued to get worse, day after day, without a diagnosis, without treatment, without any hope of improvement. Only the pain slowly increasing until the end. It is the most prehistoric death imaginable. Not because of a giant predator, not because of a natural catastrophe, but because of the absolute lack of knowledge in a world that had no way to help her.
And looking at all of this, what remains? Prehistory was not just a world of brutes. It was a world of people who suffered, who were cared for, who killed one another, and who sometimes died from things as small as a badly positioned tooth or too much vitamin in the liver they had just eaten. These fossils are not just bones, they are stories. And some of these stories are so unique that they will never happen again, because the world that created them no longer exists. If you made it this far, subscribe to the channel, because there is much more of this coming.